I still remember the flimsy lie I told the cop who checked my ID the night Oliver Stone's Natural Born Killers opened in Little North Bay, Ontario. I keep my driver's license in the glove compartment like my dad showed me. It's my brother's night with the car, you see. He dropped us off here. The cop stuck his flashlight in my face and looked at me long and hard. Must have decided I wasn't worth the trouble turfing me and my little group of misfits. We had come to see the movie the media was warning us all about. Based on a screenplay by Quentin Tarantino and reworked into a fever dream by Oliver Stone, Richard Rutowski, and David Bellows, Natural Born Killers promised sickeningly ultra-violent story of star-crossed lovers Mickey and Mallory as they dragged the media by the nose through transgression after transgression against the very society which created them. Prodigal children returned to slay father and mother alike. We knew the white people on CNN were freaking the fuck out about it. We knew our parents would hate it if they could be bothered to care. I'm sorry, Constable. I guess we just weren't expecting all this for a movie. That much was true. Never before or since have I ever been to a movie screening where they checked your ID when you bought your tickets, and then had police standing with the ticket takers and pulling out groups of people suspected of being underage or who otherwise looked like they might be trouble. Once we'd made it safely to our seats, we thought we could breathe. We thought we had successfully made it in under the dragnet. But it was then that we spotted the roving patrols of bored-looking cops with flashlights going up and down the aisles of the luminous great halls of the theater in North Bay Mall, one of the last shows I saw there before it became a multiplex and lost some of its heart and soul. What kind of movie would we motley crew of young men be about to experience? If this movie had cops swarming the opening night, if the authorities were that bothered by it, then perhaps we were in for something rare indeed. Of course, it turns out that we were. Natural Born Killers is a one-of-a-kind piece of cinema, the likes of which we have never really seen before, and despite the best efforts of hordes of pale imitators, we've never really seen it again. A work of pure prophecy, a work that distills the age in which it was made in so clearly it can destroy you with a glance. You see, we were a group of mostly young men living in the earliest days of the internet, the borderlands of a massive expansion in media awareness. Small city teens into anything you have to mail order from somewhere that isn't here. People who were starting to feel like something was happening, that maybe things weren't quite right after all. After the boom times of the 1980s, our generation was thrust into limbo. The money taps were dry and the circus was leaving town and taking many of our illusions with them. We watched Rodney King get beat. We watched LA burn in the aftermath. We saw OJ and Cato in the white Bronco. We saw journalists testify about the CIA selling crack cocaine, using the money to fund freedom fighters in Latin America. All the cynicism we tried to party down in the excesses of the 80s was back home to roost. We started to see a vast and interconnected world with media being used to shape ideas and mass consciousness. We were early readers of cyberpunk science fiction. We were early adopters of the idea that the future wasn't going to be a happy place and perhaps late capitalism was going to be a real downer for the vast majority of us. We had grown up with a million imitators of the Blade Runner aesthetic, the bleak, ever-present advertising. It would be a few years more before we discovered the mashup insanity of video art terror units like Emergency Broadcast Network. But we felt the tension building and reverberating throughout popular culture. We were in some kind of end times. The eschaton was just around the corner. Natural Born Killers blew our faces off with over 300 cuts that flew at you like jagged pieces of ice, cuts that tore apart your everyday reality and constructed it as a wild, hallucinatory nightmare. We sat transfixed in that theater and let our minds get utterly blown out. There is no question in my mind the police should have stopped us now that I look back on it. As we stumbled out in the darkness of the theater, we were jacked up. I'll never forget it. The computer shop in the mall had some staff milling about. A game was just being released at midnight, and they were trying out the first copies they got to unseal. The game, of course, was the ID Software masterpiece Doom 2. A few hours later, we were all hip-deep in demon blood and chain gun bullets. It was an essentially 90s experience, and exactly what all those scared white people were afraid would happen. We watched Natural Born Killers, played violent video games, listened to goth music, gangsta rap. We ate it all up. In the glow of that monitor and the aftermath of a really good shotgun kill, the gore from my enemies strewn around in pixelated glory, I can still distinctly recall feeling like if I had a mirror, you might see the word demon written on my face. Was this really the only way out of this? Was it just going to be blood and transgression? what would our new millennium look like? From where I sat those days, I didn't see a future. What we are living in now makes the media landscape of natural-born killers look like a playground. 3,000 leaping, swirling cuts is nothing. All day, every day, it comes at us. Cold, icy slivers of reality. A million cries for something. We click on, we swipe to the left. This is the future, and it is so much worse than we thought. The escape that Stone suggests at the climax of the film, destroying the media, seems as remote a possibility as landing on Mars and breathing air.
Dave Pace, thanks a lot, man. So this is, I mean, I'm taking this as, I mean, this is one of your favorite films ever.
I would say it's my most memorable film experience.
I
think it's my most. I'm not saying I don't think it was my favorite film of all time.
Yeah,
but because I mean, it is a deeply flawed thing, and it is a thing of its time.
Yeah, and that's the thing, I wanted to bring up about this movie is that to me, it played like it was very dated to me. And
for sure,
you bring up a really good point that there's all these imitators that come after natural born killers that are just so soft and weak, and they just try to copy what this man, I think at the time, really beautifully put on film. I mean, his voice is loud. The film was unlike, anything that I think people had seen probably since Clockwork Orange here, in America. And I'm watching it this time around. And it's funny too, Billy, because I watched this after I watched Nightcrawler, and I think, it had the reverse effect on me. So.
That's probably the correct sequence to watch these movies.
Like you had you put on this film and then watched Nightcrawler. I did.
That was like Nightcrawler was a day at the beach compared to Natural Born Killers. Man.
But it didn't. It's weird because it wasn't Dave. It wasn't. It didn't. I hadn't watched it in a while, and it didn't have the effect on me that I thought it would. I thought I was going to revisit something that meant so much to me, and it just kind of. It wasn't there, man. It just didn't. Right. It didn't happen for me.
Because you're not who you were then.
I hear you.
And you're not who you were then.
Yeah, because I do remember. I mean, I didn't see this in the theater, but I do remember watching it. Somebody, getting the VHS copy and sitting in a living room with a few friends, probably Christiana and Taverny, Billy, and I remember watching the movie, and it had such a huge effect on me, at the time, because it was so different. It was wildly different, and the ideas were different, and they were the perfect thing for thoughtful young men to put their brains around.
And to emulate.
Yeah.
It was the Fight Club of its time.
Right. And today I'm watching it, I'm like, I can't see, I think, unless you're a film fanatic and you really understand the history of film, if you're watching this today as a young person, I think they're just numb to it. I really think that they would just be numb to it. I think they would be bored with it. Like I said, unless they were really into film and really into cinema and having an understanding of who Oliver Stone is and what what he was trying to accomplish at that time, it would be, it wouldn't work with younger people. Jeff, what about you, dude? How are you feeling about this? You're a little bit younger than us, so.
Yeah, I was like, where is it, 94 it came out?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, so I was 13 when this came out, and I saw it around then, or like 94, 95. I loved this movie when I was 14.
Right.
And just because it was so bizarre, and its metaphors are so simple and broad, like just so bold and broad that it's like for someone who is 15 to 25, like it's amazing.
It's perfect.
But I like watching it last night. I was like, just not buying it at all.
That's how I felt, man. And it sucked too because I was getting annoyed like at watching it. I'm like, I can't believe I'm not loving this piece that I adored 20 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, because it really changed. Like when you watched, like, say, and we've discussed this too, Billy and Dave. You know how in the 90s there was this revolution of cinema in the 90s, and people were doing things a little bit different. So at this time, you know, you had Pulp Fiction is out, and El Mariachi is out, and so on and so forth. And you know, you're getting like, you know, film is changing, and now it's just all that stuff is just so blah to me.
Yeah,
it's so weird. I mean, they're great. It's really a great film, and it's an important film. Watching it now, though, it just doesn't have the same effect on me.
Yeah, it's just that surface of jumping all over the place, and it doesn't really say anything that. And also, you know, like Dave was saying before, you know, like some people might not be. You know, this is something that's like obvious to like my group of friends and people that I know, but like it just seems like it's just so, I don't know, just kind of boring.
Right.
Listen, I'm sorry, you guys are wrong. That movie was awesome. I had nightmares last night after watching that movie. I was like, okay. See, the thing is, I was never like the hugest Natural Born Killers.
That
fan.
last cut, Billy. Tell me that last cut isn't fucking brilliant, right? Like the last big super cut at the end, where it's just the
video shot.
Yeah, just the video, and it's just the music and the fucking just the cuts just start getting more rapid, and oh my god.
Yeah,
that's where it would get me every time. That's the part of the movie that would get me right in the guts every time.
I think to some extent you guys are right that there's always, you know, the eternal fucking argument about this movie is the script by Tarantino versus the movie by Oliver Stone. And it's just this film nerd shit that everyone's been talking about.
Yeah, the argument is that like basically Stone turned this into a media piece, whereas Tarantino's script was basically
was more true romance.
It was a cat and mouse affair between Scagnetti and the Knoxes.
Yeah,
you know, where the story was more about a policeman turning himself into what he was chasing.
Yeah, I mean, my take on it is that yes, there's probably it's very. I love the surface of the movie. I think the story is in the surface of the movie. It's dated, but in a good way. No movie better sums up the 1990s visually than Natural Born Killers. It's just everything you've ever seen. Like, you know, not to go back to Nightcrawler or anything, but the thing in Natural Born Killers is they're already showing like media manipulation in Natural Born Killers is just a throwaway. That's one out of 1,000 bloody skulls that they've heaped up in a giant funeral pyre in Natural Born Killers and set alight, you know? Like, it is a nonstop circus, and the production of that movie I just cannot believe. I mean, they're driving around in, you know, the car, and it's obviously on a stage with these rear projection screens, and they've got these demons lit in red and green running alongside the car, and I mean, it's just insane. I loved it.
Stone's playing African jungle music at maximum volume at all time on set.
Yeah, I mean, the Juliette Lewis,
right? Like
Juliette Lewis still scares the shit out of me in that movie. You know, Woody Harrelson still scares the shit out of me. Like there's something real, at least for that time. I do agree it's kind of a time capsule, but in a good way for me.
But to me, watching Stone do this, you know, like at that point in time between JFK and Natural Born Killers and Nixon, it's like that whole black and white, cut the black and white, cut the color, you know, these extreme close-ups, these fast cuts, you know.
It is a little Rob Zombie.
It's just to me, I'm like, I don't know. It's
Rob Zombie before he was Rob Zombie, right?
Yeah.
This is
Well, it
like
was
proto
White
zombie.
Zombie.
This is exactly. This is proto zombie.
right.
And that's kind of the point, right? Like this,
Yeah.
Natural Born Killers is the language of the '90s, right? It
that's
laid
it.
out the entire. It's like
on the nose.
you
On
know,
the nose.
if you want to decode what the '90s was about, you really only need Natural Born Killers as an artifact. You know, like it would be the only thing you would really need to really decode what was happening in the '90s.
Yeah, I feel like, and I totally agree. I feel like if you had to look at one, like if your grandkids ever came to you and said, you know, hey, Grandpa, what was life like in the 90s? I was just, you know, are you old enough? All right, you're going to watch this movie. You know, like that's what I grew up watching. The Menendez brothers, OJ, the Kato and, you know, the white Bronco and all this shit. You know, it was like, that was... If you turned on your television, that's what it looked like. If you flipped channels on your television, it looked like Natural Born Killers.
Well, and that's why I think the movie feels means something different for people who lived through that time.
Yeah.
And I hate to be that guy. I don't want to be that
Yeah.
guy. But like it
Mr.
really
Nostalgia.
does mean something different to the people who lived through that and remember like gathering around the TV and watching the White Bronco and you know like seeing that shit happen.
So there's no Blu-ray version of this film out there? Because I got to tell you, I watched this on DVD and like it was like the screen was freaking small and I think that might have had a big effect on me too watching this movie. I mean,
I didn't get a Blu-ray. I would love to see
yeah, that's what I'm saying, that it's not even available.
Yeah.
I watched this on DVD. That was the only thing that was available. And I have the DVD here, so I didn't even wind up getting it from Netflix. I wound up just throwing the DVD on, and it was like one of those situations where you put the like my screen in the living room is like, you know, it's like, you know, we all have like those big screen TVs in our living room, and it was just like a small box in the center of the
yeah, and then if you change your view settings to blow it up to full,
you don't want to
screen,
do
it's
that.
blurry and
you
shit.
Can't do that. Yeah, you really can't. So you're better off just keeping it where it was at. And I couldn't recapture, you know, the whole scope.
I think you guys got high off of this movie too, and everything has been the entire the drug of cinema has been ramped up.
I agree.
You know, year by year.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
So that now you can't get high off of it anymore.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, it's true.
It just doesn't kick like it used to.
Tom, I'm telling you, you got to watch this the right way. You got to watch this on VHS,
Okay.
on a VCR, on a shitty old TV. That's what you got to do.
You might be right about that. I mean,
I'm not kidding, man. I am not kidding at all. This is an essential experience. I've learned that there are certain films that you need to experience in their native habitat, and the native habitat of Natural Born Killers is in that, like, you know, nice 4x3, you know,
right,
VHS, you know, shitty, you know, scan lines all over the screen. You need that. I think it only contributes to the experience.
Oh, God.
Even better, you could watch it on a black and white TV, so you could see those shots go from black and white to black and white.
That would help.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I'm gonna go one last round of defense on this because again, the Natural Born Killers, it was never like my favorite. I didn't have the same experience you guys had with it, so it was never ramped up to that level in my head. I saw it, you know, much later, probably, geez, at least 6 years, 7 years after it came out. So, and I liked it a lot. I was like, it was. You know, I couldn't believe what I was watching. I did not know a movie could be made that way. And to this day, I mean, looking at it last night, I'm like, I just don't know how you produce something like that. It's a miracle. It's an opera that's just chopped up into a million pieces. And there's so many ideas. Every 10 seconds, there's a new idea about how to make movies.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, Billy Stone could be really impressive sometimes.
Oh, yeah. He was on fire back
I think
then,
so,
man.
too.
Between JFK and this one.
Yeah.
This nearly devastated the director of photography making this film.
Yeah,
like,
Robert Richardson. It's so funny too because I invited Robert Richardson onto the show. They just completely ignored the request, and I was like, "Wow, that's interesting." And then I did the research, and this guy fucking hated this experience. Yeah. Horrible.
Yeah, he went through hell. He almost got a divorce. Like it was a total fucking nightmare for this guy. You know, Stone made his life an absolute living hell.
Oh my God.
But sorry guys, the one thing I wanted to just say, the theme of the movie, like, I think the story is good. It's buried under the surface. Is right there in the title, Natural Born Killers. When I came away from this last night, it was like I hadn't seen it in 10 years. It's been a long time, and I just walked away from it going, like, the theme that he's getting at is existential. It's about human beings ourselves. We are natural born killers, and in every one of us is the nature of a murderer. We run around the world killing it. I mean, it's right there in the movie. Like, at the end, he's become like the Zen Buddhist priest in prison, shaves his head, and he's talking all this philosophy and stuff, and he talks about, people are the ones running around the world killing animals and chopping down forests, only we don't call it murder, we call it industry.
Right.
And the question posed by the movie philosophically is, can we evolve? And to pretend that we are not these natural born killers, to pretend that we are some kind of angel and everything we do is from our better nature is bullshit.
It's ignorance.
We're animals, and we pretend that we're not animals. And that movie, for better or worse, if you're pissing off politicians, you're probably doing something right. When Bob Dole is condemning your movie without having seen it, you're probably doing something right.
It's like making music and Tipper Gore hating you.
Exactly. So it's like, if you're pissing people off, you're probably peeling back the mask and showing the fanged animal beneath.
Right.
So I loved it, man. I thought it was fantastic.
The thing about the natural, like the humans being killers by nature. I mean, I feel like he hedges his bets on that, though, by showing both sets of their parents as, the clear 100%, undisputable cause of their rotten behavior.
He does that a couple times, where it's like the Indian guy in the smoke hut sees the projections on them, and one of the projections is too much TV.
Yes,
and I think that's kind of a cop out. Like, yeah, he does that a couple times, where it's like, oh, they were abused, that's why they are the way they are, or they watch too much TV, that's why they are the way they are.
Yeah, but so he doesn't.
I can forgive that a little bit, because the Indian dude also talks about them being in a world of ghosts. And I thought, if ever there was a metaphor for the existence we are in today, it's we are floating through a world of ghosts, man.
Yeah, it's fucking beautiful imagery when you think about it.
You're right. It is a very existential piece, Billy. Like, I hear you on that. I really do. I really, really do. It's amazing, too, because you talk about how we're, as humans, we are natural born killers. I mean, you're absolutely right about that. And you ask if we could evolve, and the answer to me is no, because, I mean, if you really think about it, the number one person we're guilty of murdering is ourself. We kill ourselves even. We go out of our way to do things, to kill ourselves. I mean, it's
two natures fighting against themselves. It's in a human being are multiple natures, and those natures war with each other. I mean, the conflict is the nature of existence. Whether it's on every level, it's conflict everywhere you look.
Right. I rudely cut off Dave there, and I'm sorry. That thought was on the tip of my tongue. I had to get out there. Dave, please continue your thought, and my apologies.
No worries, man. I was just saying how it's a profound thing, that whole scene in with the native chief and that whole thing. That whole scene is very profound in a way that, yeah, sure, it's obvious, the too much TV stuff and all this very blatant stuff, but it's no less real, and it's no less accurate, and it's no less, if not true, because fine, you'll find you can line up 100 people, and 100 of them will have studies that say TV rots your kid's brain, and 100 of them will say no, it doesn't, it's the best thing ever for them, and 100 will say it makes no difference at all, right? So it's really not about whether that's true or not. It's about whether we fear that too much TV has done this to our kids. We fear that too much video games and too much media and too much, all these things that we throw at them, we wonder if it's going to prove to be the thing that ultimately hurts them or turns them down a path that we don't want them to go down necessarily,
It divorces them from a sense of self. Like they are never able to have a sense of self and identity. And I mean, Woody Harrelson in the movie, he's basically he turns into like a cross between the Dalai Lama and Charles Manson by the end of the movie,
absolutely.
And Americans love nothing if not putting words of wisdom in the mouth of killers. So take it or leave it. But he talks about murder being pure. And there's a truth to that. Like, people are obsessed with all of this stuff because they want to touch something real. And there's nothing more real than life and death. It's harder to embrace life because it's more of a challenge, and the easy quick fix is to have a sense of death in your life and everything. It's harder to choose to turn to live with death without becoming pessimistic and depressed and all this shit. But he talks about the media focusing on him because they don't have a sense of reality themselves. He gives them a sense of reality. They feel fear, they feel excitement, and suddenly they feel like they're normal human beings. But it's just quick fixes, like he says, it's this kind of cheeseball thing about love redeeming him and all this stuff. But there's legitimacy to that, like when you can have a sense of self, you don't need all of these other media distracting you all the time. It's not about the media. It's just that media is there to be your drug to divorce you from yourself if you want. You can just get lost in it. World of ghosts.
Well, exactly. And then as they choose to do in the end, take the old shotgun to the camera, right?
And I didn't remember this. The last shot the shot immediately after that, I think it goes to black, and then it comes up and the credits are rolling, and Mickey and Mallory are in a Winnebago with their kids, like driving down the highway, and I was like, oh my God, man, like. That's it, man. The murderers become suburbanites, it's the American story. We come over here, we rape, pillage, and plunder everything in sight, and then build track housing, and you became Canadian there for a second.
And churches.
You build track housing and grow a beer belly. Like after you've raped, pillaged, and murdered everything, you just you settle down and watch some TV.
That's perfect.
Exactly. You sit upon your mighty horde and let all envy you.
Hey, one thing I did really enjoy, and I was very impressed with, was with the way Stone handled Mallory's horrible backstory with her father.
The great Rodney Dangerfield scenes.
This is extraordinary stuff. And
that was amazing.
It is, and it's obviously very sensitive kind of material. And the way he goes about it is genius. I mean, it's genius. I would have never have thought of something like that in a million years. And all I could picture is just whoever Stone collaborated with on that idea, just like it has to be one of those moments where you're like, you're onto something that's just amazing. And
it was like Married with Children. Like it was shot like Married with Children.
It was so good too because Harrelson comes from a sitcom background. I mean, he made his way through Cheers. This is where he began his popularity on Cheers, which is one of the biggest sitcoms of all time, hailed as one of the best sitcoms of all times. And his character is one of the more popular characters of all time on Cheers. And it was so great watching that unfold because when he comes onto the stage and he's got like
when he kicks open the door and the audience cheers.
And he does that thing that an actor will sometimes do, and that's like kind of like give a nod to the audience. And he does it in that really cool, like, he's got the smirk, and he's just like, he lets him clap and he lets him calm down, and then he delivers his line. And it's like Kramer
coming in through Seinfeld's
or Fonzie,
door.
like, when Fonzie would enter, when Henry Winkler would come on stage, I mean, the crowd would go crazy, and you'd have to wait like a 10, 15 second period sometimes for them to calm down. And like, they kind of like do this subtle acknowledgement of, toward the audience. And oh my God, it's like that to me. I mean, you guys are talking about all kinds of stuff, but that to me is like the best like scene in the movie to me.
That whole scene is split into two different sequences. As I recall in the movie, the first is sort of the introduction, and then the second part is where they come back and murder the family.
Yeah, because he goes to jail in between.
Right, exactly. And that was insanely brilliant, man. Yeah. And apparently Rodney Dangerfield had no idea what the fuck they were doing either.
Oh, that's the whack.
Like, he was like, I do not understand why you're filming it this way.
He did not understand any of it, and it didn't matter. I mean,
but he's brilliant. He's so scary, man.
Yeah. It's grotesque.
The
whole thing is grotesque. It makes your stomach churn. And like what gets me, and what I think is hinted at, and that maybe I probably didn't understand the first time. I'm sure I didn't understand the first time I was watching it.
It's so bad. Oh,
you think about those stains?
Oh my!
The stains on the white tank.
But he's really acting here. Stone is getting a really good performance out of him, because I'm not thinking of Caddyshack or Back to School or Easy Money here. I'm really thinking of him as this fucking god-awful human being.
It's just amazing dark twist on the Dangerfield persona, Like, it's just so, like, the deliveries, the timing and everything is totally Dangerfield, but you're just like, man, they modulated that performance down to this sinister level, man.
Yeah, they're playing on that lovable loser kind of vibe that he has as a comic, but like
that's a casting coup, that one was.
But the presentation too, you have to keep in mind the presentation is this vanilla sitcom. It's this very generic sitcom, and to me that speaks to the idea that what's happening here is very generic. What's happening here, this horrible abuse, right? This is not rare. This is common as the sitcom. This is going on in every household that would be watching this proverbial show. And I think that, I don't know, watching it again, I think that struck me more, that I'm more aware. I think I wasn't aware of that sort of thing when I was first watching this film, and going through it again and seeing that it adds that extra creep factor to it all.
Oh man, the dirty shirt. But it's that whole outfit, Jeff. It's so cliche. Think about it as cliche, but it fucking works for some reason. It's
let me make you clean. I'll make sure you're clean.
Now stairs. Oh my God, it's so awful.
One last shout out. Tommy Lee Jones as the warden.
Do you like this?
I thought he was hilarious.
Yeah, he's good. I mean, he's always good. And anytime he gets together with Stone, it's always sensational. I mean,
it's always a carnival.
Yeah. Well, look at what think about what they're doing in JFK. Think about those scenes that they were filming with the oh my God, what were they wearing? What were those outfits they were wearing, Billy?
Joe Pesci riding him around like
not just him, but Kevin Bacon.
in Venetian
yes,
Venetian masks and like togas or something.
Yeah, it's so bizarre. Like, how do you put that scene together? Get these actors on the set, and how do you not laugh? Is what I'm curious about.
I'm sure. I have no doubt they were laughing a lot.
I really hope so. But I did get a chance to. Real quick, before we move on to Zodiac, and I just want to talk about Oliver Stone a little bit, because he's really been a big part of all of our lives, I'm sure, in one way or another. But I did get a chance to watch Platoon, which I hadn't seen in a very long time. I've not sat down and watched it from beginning to end in a very long time, and I was really impressed with this. And we're talking about how some things could get dated and not work, but I was just curious if anyone has seen Platoon recently and how they felt about it, because it really moved me, and I was really thinking about how Casualties of War and Full Metal Jacket had an effect on me all at the same time. De Palma, Kubrick, and Stone put together films about the Vietnam War around the same time. And after watching Platoon, I really feel that this is probably the best one out of the three.
Well, I actually have seen Platoon recently. I'll jump in there.
Okay.
And I've only seen it twice, and for some reason, it never really strikes a chord with me.
It never did with me either, Billy. I swear. I've tried to give this movie a chance when I, I hadn't tried it in like 10 years, but I gave this a chance quite a few times, from the theater to VHS to cable to trying to watch it again like 10 years ago, and I was bored with it. Man, this for some reason caught me in the right. It was just one of those days, Billy. Caught me in the right mood. You know how this?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just you in the right mood. Something just creeps up on you, and you get it, and it changes you, and you're like, "Wow, I'm in on this one." And this
Platoon is very sentimental, right? It strikes a very sentimental chord, and that's what I've always appreciated about it. I see. I mean, Stone's a very sentimental filmmaker, but I mean, Platoon is an extremely sentimental, movie. It wears its heart on its sleeve.
Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah.
That's what I've always loved about it. I haven't seen it recently, but
it's very much about boyhood being stripped away, right?
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
the loss of boy's innocence.
And that's really what I think is the biggest. That could be one of the bigger themes in any war, obviously. Because that's what's going on. You're talking, especially in a war like that, where you basically don't have a choice.
Well, I always felt I've always been a huge fan of Born on the 4th of July, and I know that people are really hit and miss with their opinions on that, but I thought it was brilliant because it's the same theme, just protracted more operatically, I guess.
Right.
Stone is very much an opera composer. So yeah, I mean, I don't know why Platoon doesn't really strike a chord, but I remember watching it once years ago and going, I don't get it. And then I was like, I'm going to try this again a couple months ago. And I was like, yeah, still don't get it.
Wow.
I'll give it another 10 years, Tom. If we're still doing the show, then I'll put it on the docket. One of the things
I like about it, if I had to look for another thing that I liked about it, besides just the sentimentality, I think it's the conflict, right? I like good rivalries. And I think Barnes and Elias make good rivals.
They do. He does a great job at separating the platoon between the two, and you really get a feeling of where people's hearts and minds are at, while they're really patrolling this godforsaken part of the world pretty much unnecessarily. And there's a leader that is just kind of rogue and is there to just burn the friggin' jungle down. And the other one...
Well, he's definitely... Stone is always trying to make myths, and those two guys in that movie are like the archangels of heaven and hell,
Absolutely.
Like one is Lucifer and one is Michael,
Absolutely.
It's just like he's creating a mythology about the halves of the American psyche,
Yeah.
And that, I mean, all that I like, and then Charlie Sheen is just sort of caught between the two of them, like ground up in the gears. But yeah, I don't know why it doesn't really... I mean, I like the scenes where they're fucking with the village, because those are just the most horrific things you've ever seen. Ever.
Oh, that's awful. Yeah,
it's rough.
Yeah, I mean that takes some balls to. He's probably the first guy who ever showed something like that in a mainstream movie, right?
Yeah,
about Vietnam.
That's such a conflicting. That scene is just wild because Charlie Sheen goes through like one extreme behavior to an opposite extreme behavior where he is just fed up and he's like. He's like shooting bullets at this Vietnamese dude, and he wants to friggin' kill the guy. And then the next thing you know, he's saving a child from being raped by these friggin' animals. And it's and it just goes to show you like what. I mean, I don't know anything fucking close to what it could be like to have to do something like that. But if anything, I think Stone kind of put something together on screen that you could just look at and say, this shit's just wrong. You know, it's just fucked up and wrong, and you know, he does a really great job with that, and it moved me. I mean, I was a very emotional watching this movie, and it never affected me like that before. So he did a great job. My all-time favorite Oliver Stone movie, though, real quick, is Talk Radio.
Still haven't seen it.
You got to check that out, Jeff. You've seen it, right?
Yeah, it's that's what Oliver Stone's a pretty big blind spot for me. Like a lot of the major ones, I still haven't seen. But yeah, Talk Radio is one that I think I watched with. I've definitely watched with you, like maybe like 15 years ago, something like that.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, I remember very little about it, but I do remember really liking it. Actually, I read it not that long ago.
Oh,
maybe
well,
5 years.
It's a book that Bogosian adapted into a play, right?
Well, it's just a play. Like
Okay.
it originated as a play.
Okay.
And I know it doesn't have the assassination stuff in it.
Okay.
Like it doesn't have that angle, but
With the ending in the film.
yeah.
Gotcha.
Like I can't remember how what happened. It just kind of like, I mean, compared to the ending of the film, it just kind of like peters out.
Gotcha. Yeah, I hear you. But listeners, check out Talk Radio because it has everything to do with with what we're talking about here with media and stuff. And it's really Oliver Stone's first take on media in his film. Well, Salvador actually probably is, right? Now that I think about it, but it's one of the
Salvador was about it was about reporters going south of the border to basically get a bunch of photos, do a bunch of drugs, and find some girls on the beach.
Right. So Salvador and Talk Radio, two Stone films that precede Natural Born Killers about the media. Check them out, guys. Let's move on to Zodiac. Let's talk about David Fincher. I want to thank everybody for talking about Oliver Stone. We've talked about Stone before, but this is the first time we really talked about him in depthly, and I really appreciate it, guys. Awesome job.